name is Ben Herzog. I'm a senior meteorologist at the Weather Service office in St. Louis. And this is the talk that I actually co-presented at AMS this last year with Elise Smith, who was a meteorologist at KRCG in Jefferson City. She's since moved on to Buffalo, New York, moved on to bigger and better things. But what we wanted to do is, you see the title of the slide here is Mid-May Miracle, How Communication and Collaboration Across the Central Missouri Weather Enterprise Impacted the Outcome of the May 22nd, 2019 Jefferson City EF-3 tornado. This event was the first tornado emergency that our office had ever actually issued. As you'll see, it was a very powerful tornado moving into one of the more populated areas in this part of the state. And some fairly miraculous things happened with this event, and we just wanted to take a little bit of time to highlight sort of everything that went into that. So before I go any further, I do want to mention that we've got a couple of videos embedded here that have got audio. I have no idea how well that's going to work. So when we get to them, we'll see if they work. If they don't, I'll just kind of talk about what the audio is going in there, but hopefully things will work out all right. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So on the night of May 22nd, 2019, bear with me one second, I got to adjust my screen. Sorry about this. I'm trying to move some things around so I can actually see what's going on my own screen. All right, there we go. On the night of May 22nd, 2019, a tornado ripped through Jefferson City, Missouri, just prior to midnight. The tornado was actually on the ground for 32 miles with a peak width of around 1,000 yards. Tornado caused damage to over 1,000 homes, snapped and uprooted entire groves of trees, and actually completely destroyed a mobile home park. We've got a couple of images here that came from, this one came from our survey. This is some of the EF-3 damage that some sort of manufacturing facility sustained. Here's some imagery from an apartment complex. Elise, my co-presenter, actually had a friend who lived in these apartments. So, you know, she lived in Jefferson City, and this was all very near and dear to her because she really knew these areas that were getting hit. And so this is the part of talk that she was giving, and I'm sure she was able to convey sort of the magnitude of what was going on here much more succinctly than I can. But here's just another visual. This is actually a state penitentiary that is some 100 years, or I guess was some 100 years old. You know, it had been decommissioned for some time now, and it was like a historical landmark. But this penitentiary has sustained, you know, over 100 years worth of the weather, and a big portion of it was actually wiped out by this tornado. And then some of the more widely distributed images from this tornado is from a Toyota dealership, where you can see some pretty catastrophic damage happen there. So here's a look at the tornado path that actually crossed CWA boundaries. It started down in the southwest here in Eldon, Missouri, which is actually in Springfield, Missouri's forecast area. It crossed over the state line into Cole County, into RCWA, and just kept on moving up roughly Highway 54 and moved right on into Jefferson City. If we zoom in on Jefferson City, you can actually see it came within a mile of the state capitol building. Again, this was an EF-3 with peak winds estimated around 160 miles an hour. Thousands of structures damaged, around 30 injuries, and miraculously 0 fatalities. You know, going into this event, if you would have told me we were going to have an EF-3 tornado move through our state capitol, actually come within a mile of hitting the state capitol building, hitting what you can see here, pretty densely populated areas, and actually hitting a mobile home park, I would have told you chances are somebody's going to die on that night. And miraculously they didn't. And so that's really what the thrust of this talk is about, is what happened, what happened to prevent the loss of life? What did the Weather Enterprise do well to really facilitate what happened here? And I'll get this off, you know, I'll get this out of the way right at the beginning here. Luck certainly played a big factor in what happened here. But on top of that, I think there are several things that we did pretty well that we can identify and hopefully pass along to some other offices to utilize here. So So the way the rest of this talk is going to go is it's kind of bounce back and forth between the perspective of the Weather Service and then the perspective of our media partners, and specifically our partners at KRCG and Jefferson City. So before the storm, from the National Weather Service point of view, we can identify three things that were kind of outward facing that we really started leaning on pretty heavily in the last couple of years in our office. So the first thing we've got here, this big picture is of our WCM giving our spotter talks. Everybody here knows what spotter talks are. We're going out training spotters to try and give us ground truth reports of what we're seeing on radar. Well, in the last, I would say 2 years or so, we've devoted a big part of our spotter talks, in fact, about half of our spotter talks, to severe weather safety. And so we'll spend the first hour just talking to folks about where to get weather information, where to get severe weather information, and then especially what to do with that information once it gets to them. So, what do you do if you get a tornado warning? What if you're at home? What if you're driving? We talk about those sort of things with people. And then the second half of the talk, we actually get into the storm spotting and talking about, look for the wall cloud. This is how you report damaging winds, that kind of stuff. But we spent a lot of time trying to get our community better prepared for when severe weather comes through. So that's one thing that we've identified that we think, is helping with our communities. Another thing is the Storm Ready program. Cole County, the county which Jefferson City resides, has long been a storm ready county, and the preparedness that came through that program really shone through both during the tornado, through some extensive local dissemination that we're going to talk about here in a little while, but especially after the tornado ripped through the county. It just seemed like these folks were really, really well prepared. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I really think the Storm Ready program probably helped them get ready for an event just like this. And then finally, really an expanded use of NWS chat has gotten extremely positive feedback from all of our media partners. We've got 3 pretty big markets in our city. Well, big is a relative term. We've obviously got St. Louis, but then Columbia and Quincy have both got, or I guess Columbia and Jefferson City, the mid-Missouri market, and then Quincy, Illinois. So we've got several markets in our area, and almost unilaterally, we've gotten very high praise in our expanded use of NWS chat. And essentially, what we've started doing really in earnest last convective season was every warning team, or every warning forecaster is almost always paired with another warning forecaster. So we've essentially got these warning teams. And one of the duties of the person not actually issuing the warnings is to be putting updates into NWS chat as to what they're looking at. Why are we making this decision? Why are we issuing this warning or not issuing this other warning? And getting into some pretty specific things. The idea being here is we want to give our media partners, our broadcast meteorologists, who are the experts in communication, the very detailed information that they just don't have time to really dig down and figure out. They spend so much time wall to wall trying to communicate what's going on. They don't necessarily have the time to go and try to identify where the hail core is at, for example, or look for mark signatures or things like that. Or when it comes to tornadoes, just really highlighting specific areas. We all know sometimes tornadoes can be kind of subtle to pick out. There can be issues like side lobe contamination and things that can be really tricky to diagnose, and we'll talk about things like that. If we see a storm that looks like it's got a really great couplet on it, but a little further interrogation reveals, oh, that's actually side lobe contamination, that may be something that our media partners just simply don't have the time to really suss out, and they may be tricked by that. And so we try to put as much information as we can into NWS chat. And I think in this event, as we'll talk about as we go on, it really shone through how beneficial that was. Now, from our broadcast media's point of view, they did a number of different things here. Every spring, they'll go through and go around grocery stores and things around the area to help folks program their weather radios. They coordinate with us by advertising our spotter trainings. They have severe weather preparedness weeks, again, that they coordinate with us. Well, they'll do things on the air to help folks get prepared for severe weather coming through. And so and you can see here, they actually have got their own severe weather special as well. And that's something that a number of the media outlets in our area do, where they talk about, this is how you can get severe weather warnings, that kind of stuff. Really a lot of the same stuff that we talk about in the severe weather preparedness class. Main difference here being is they get a heck of a lot bigger audience than we do. So, but that's especially helpful. I mean, for me, that's kind of exactly what the Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program is about. We get these people that have got a much larger following than us communicating the same message as us, and that's really going to help more people in our communities be better prepared for events like this. So moving on to the day of the storm, this was the morning outlook, I believe, from SPC. You can see we've got a slight risk pushing into much of mid-Missouri with an enhanced risk down off to the south and west of our CWA. The timelines, again, are going to be kind of split up between National Weather Service activities on the left and then media activities on the right. And the first thing that happened is at 11:30 a.m., there's a pretty significant upgrade to the convective outlook. We've now got a slide across about half of our CWA and enhanced along a corridor in the northern portions of our CWA, and then a moderate risk actually pushing into the far western portions of our forecast area. This is actually the day after we had another tornado event. We actually had a pretty significant looking tornado just on the outskirts of the St. Louis metro area, plus a couple of more in mid-Missouri the day prior. My WCM and I were actually out doing a damage survey when this convective outlook came out, not far from Columbia here. The convective outlook came out and we realized, well, I guess we're cutting this survey short, and we hurried back to the office just as quick as we could to get ready for what ended up being a pretty significant day in our forecast area. So shortly after this convective outlook came out, the team at KRCG, which actually at the time was just a two-person team, it was the chief, Zach Paul, and then Elise, my co-presenter here. They had a team phone call 11:45 a.m. to kind of discuss what they were going to do. And essentially it was Elise, get some rest. She was just coming off shift from the morning show. It was Elise, get some rest. Zach's going to take care of tonight, and then you'll take over in the morning tomorrow. And that's what happened. Just morning came a little bit earlier for Elise than she thought it was going to. So around 4 p.m., we had the first round of tornado watches issued from northeastern Oklahoma into west central Illinois. And then at that point, they had their second team phone call, just kind of solidifying their plans. At this point, Zach's getting ready. You know, they've got the afternoon news coming up, and at this point, he's preparing to go wall to wall. And then by 7 p.m., we've got tornado warned storms moving into mid-Missouri. You can see a pretty large line of supercells moving right along where those watches were at. And so at that point, our partners at KRCG went wall to wall. They're doing so for roughly about 3 hours or so. And you can see there are a number of storms moving through here. I actually I think maybe one of them put down a weak tornado, probably about 30 miles north of Jefferson City. We had a report of a tornado just north of Columbia, which is I think it's the second biggest city in our CWA. But that ended up being a false report. So it was a busy period here in the evening, but it wasn't crazy. There weren't a ton of tornadoes. There weren't a ton of tornado warnings, but definitely busy. So we move on to 10 p.m. And actually at this point, we've got no active warnings. And so this is a bit of a lull. You know, we've talked to Zach about this, and he's kind of thinking, all right, finally I get to get a bit of a breather. We're going with our evening news now. We'll have the anchors talk for a little while. I'll come in and do my weather spots, but you know, probably time to start getting ready, because you see we've got a second round of tornado watches issued just to the south and east of where that first round of watches were at. By 10:45 p.m., we get this radar image. So this is from our radar. It's a good distance away from the area we're particularly concerned about. But we Springfield ended up issuing a warning just upstream of Jefferson City, including the town of Eldon. And so at that point, you know, that's well within KRCG's market, and so they're going wall to wall again. So they got about a 45-minute respite from having to talk constantly about the weather. And unfortunately for them, it's only going to get busier from here on out for the next few hours. Shortly thereafter, we get a TDS on this storm in Eldon, Missouri. And so at this point, we've obviously got a confirmed a confirmed tornado. The bottom of our beam at this point is over 8,000 feet in the air. And so the fact that we're seeing this TDS And in fact, the TDS extends a couple of tilts higher than this, is indicative that, obviously we've got a pretty strong storm coming in. And so that certainly prompted a tornado warning from our office as it's about to cross the county line into our CWA. And you can see that there with the second warning in Cole County. And then so as this thing continues to move along, we get the tornado warning is issued for Jefferson City. At that point, the wireless emergency alerts and tornado sirens are sounded in Jefferson City. And of course, at that point, Elise, who was sleeping, preparing to come in the morning, wakes up and does what every good meteorologist does. And rather than taking shelter, looks at a radar and figures out what's going on. So here's where we're going to have a little bit of audio. Hopefully this works out. But the idea here is I just wanted to give you guys an idea of how Zach sounds when we issue what I'll call, I guess, for the comparison's sake in this talk, a run-of-the-mill tornado warning. Hopefully you guys will be able to hear this. All right.
This is a tornado warning. This is going to include Jefferson City. That's for the same storm we've been tracking.
So I'm not sure if you were able to hear that. It was pretty short, but it was pretty low key, pretty tempered. He goes, so this is a tornado warning. This includes the area of Jefferson City, and then that's kind of it. Obviously, he goes on and talks about it a little bit more, but he's not going crazy at this point. Just trying to make people aware there's something coming their way, something moving into a populated area. Excuse me. So moving on a little bit further, the tornado more or less stays steady state as it's going along up to the northeast. The TDS kind of comes and goes. It gets kind of diffusive at times. The radial velocity, or I'm sorry, the velocity imagery is not looking great. There's a couple there, but it's not really intensifying. And that continues for the next 30, 45 minutes or so till we get to 11:38 here. Again, this is looking at our radar, and that TDS really comes back. It's really apparent, obviously, here just off to the northwest of Wardsville. You can really see it there, co-located with gate-to-gate velocities. So that's getting pretty confident that's a strong tornado. And so at this point, the tornado warning is upgraded to considerable. I turned my volume up a little bit more here. So
on the south side of Jefferson City, this tornado is on the ground. That's what I'm getting. It is on the ground. It has been observed. The damage threat for this is considerable as it's moving into the capital city.
So he's saying things like the tornado is observed, the damage threat is considerable. Very clearly, those are words that come directly out of our warnings. On top of that, all these things that I'm talking about, what we're seeing about the TDS changing, what we're seeing about the couplet looking more or less strong, we're putting that in NWS chat as well. And so not only do they have this information coming to them through the text of the warnings, but we're pumping this into NWS chat. I actually downloaded the logs from this event, and I think I copied, granted this is a long event, but I think I copied and pasted the log into a Word document, and it ended up being like 43 pages long, just because I wanted the transcript of what some of these were. But we are putting a lot of information into chat as this is going along. So again, this TDS really intensifies. We see it as high as 13,000 feet. So at that point, we go ahead and upgrade the tornado warning to considerable. You can see it's on the doorstep of Jefferson City at this point. Actually goes a little bit further in time, and now the TDS is visible as high as 17,000 feet. So with the TDS height of what it was here and the strength of the rotational velocity, I thought I had it marked somewhere around here. It doesn't look like I do. I can't remember exactly what the rotational velocity is, but it was definitely notable. And in fact, if you look at some of the nomograms that compare rotational velocity with TDS height, it was indicative of a strong to violent tornado. And so we're putting some pretty firm language into NWS chat right now. In fact, I've got the logs in front of me. So we've got at 11:41, upgraded tornado warning to considerable tag in Cole County based off TDS debris to near 10,000 feet. So that was just a little bit after, or a little bit before this scan to 17,000 feet came in. Tornado heading right for Jefferson City. 11:42, spotter confirmed tornado in Wardsville looking northwest. Debris now to at least 13,000 feet. This is a very dangerous tornado in all caps. So as we move on a little bit further, with that intensifying rotational velocity, with that TDS height pushing higher and higher, and with the tornado essentially moving into Jefferson City at this point, we go ahead and reissue the tornado warning as a tornado emergency. And this is a key point I want to make, and it goes along with the note that recently came out when it comes to tornado emergencies, is we reissued this as a tornado emergency. We didn't simply do an SVS to the existing tornado warning, we reissued the tornado emergency. A key thing that did is it resounded the tornado sirens in Jefferson City. And from numerous interactions we've had with partners at integrated warning team meetings, just in informal chats with our media partners, and really just talking to people out in the community, this second tornado warning really got people's attention. Fortunately, Jefferson City and Cole County in general don't have the all clear policy that some counties do, where they'll sound the sirens again once the threat is gone. They don't do that. And so when the tornado sirens went off again, that really got people's attention. They thought, and especially when we went off again, that really got people's attention. At this point, Elise did take shelter because, you know, the tornado was on her doorstep as well. And then let's listen to what Zach sounded like as this tornado emergency was issued. So in chat, I want to show you that first. Again, pretty strong language, upgraded to catastrophic tag. Again, a very violent and dangerous tornado heading right toward Jefferson City.
Again, this is potentially catastrophic. This is a tornado emergency. This is a tornado emergency. If you are in Jefferson City, you need to get into your basements. If you're in Holt Summit, you are now also in the path of this tornado. You need to get into your basements. Northern Cole County, all of Jefferson City, Holt Summit. This is now including New Broomfield. This goes just up to Fulton. This includes the Callaway Nuclear Plant, Mocaine. Reedsville is going to include you again as well. Again, this is a tornado emergency. Again, a very violent and dangerous tornado is moving right into Jefferson City.
So obviously there's a lot more energy, a lot more urgency in his voice there than there was, especially from the initial tornado warning, and even from when we upgraded to a considerable tag, just a lot more urgency in his voice here. And I don't know if you caught the very last thing that he said, but it was almost verbatim. A very violent and dangerous tornado is heading right toward Jefferson City. He got that directly from what we put into chat. And to me, more than anything that I've seen, that really drives home the point that this extra layer of communication that we've had with our media partners over the last almost 2 years now is just absolutely key and an invaluable part of the whole warning, I guess the integrated warning team. So moving a little bit farther down the line, we've now got a debris signature very near Jefferson City right now. Tornado moving through Jefferson City right now, about to cross the Missouri River. And that's eventually what it did. It moved across the Missouri River and actually dissipated pretty quickly. It did some pretty significant damage to some trees just across the river from Jefferson City, and then pretty much went away. So as soon as the tornado was moved out of the area, Elise went to work. She drove to Wardsville, which is just to the southwest of Jefferson City, and started driving around trying to figure out what happened, what got damaged. She was close enough to the damage path that she knew, and obviously with all the signatures that you're seeing on radar, she knew something surely got hit. And so her reporter in her went out and started trying to figure out what was going on. So after the storm, from Elise's perspective, she arrived at damage in Jefferson City right around midnight, so very shortly after this tornado came through. And we've got a video in here of her that I think is going to pop up here shortly. But here's some images that she took, some pretty significant damage. She's talking to some emergency response personnel. And then here's the video of her going live at looks like almost 1 a.m.
I was one of the first people on the scene here in Christie Drive tonight. And what we can describe the scene is as chaos. That's what a state trooper told me when I first arrived here. Now, traffic is being directed away from Christie Drive at the moment. For those of you who don't know, that is just south of Jefferson City, off of Highway 54. They are directing traffic away because this is an active scene. So for all the Good Samaritans out there, we do not want you going into tornado impacted areas. There is debris everywhere. And another potential threat is the power.
So one thing that's coming across here, at least that we found was helpful, is at least steering people away from the damaged areas. Now, I'm sure you're going to get a handful of the gawkers out there that this is giving them intel on where to go to see what happened. But we think by and large, this is keeping people from going to these damaged areas, keeping people out of harm's way. But additionally, her reporting out there actually gave a bit of a starting point to our survey teams. We're obviously streaming all of our media partners as this event's unfolding. We issued the tornado emergency. We realize this is a very significant event for us. And so we were starting to think, all right, well, what do we do now? How are we going to handle this? Unfortunately, as we'll see here in a minute, Jefferson City is on the far western fringes of our CWA. We've got the entire rest of the 7/8 of our CWA we've still got to be issuing warnings for, but we're at least formulating our plan on how we're going to survey this storm already as early as 1 a.m. So at 4 a.m., the weather team transitioned to studio roles and did continued wall-to-wall. It was somewhere in there between 12 and 4 that Elise came back into the office and took over for an exhausted Zach, who went home and slept. And they actually continued wall-to-wall coverage all the way till 12:30 p.m., not necessarily because there were ongoing storms, but because their city had gotten rocked by this very significant tornado. From the National Weather Service's point of view, the final warning in our CWA didn't actually expire until 5 a.m. And it was somewhere shortly thereafter that our survey team departed for Jefferson City, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours from our office. At 7 a.m., the survey team arrived in Jefferson City, and they got underway from there. So again, they got there around 7 a.m. And one thing that really stood out to the survey team that went, which was our SUE, our WCM, and one of the lead forecasters at our office, it was immediately clear that the first responders had exceptional control over the situation. In fact, before I was going to AMS, I really wanted to make sure I could convey just how impressed we were with what they did here. So I was talking to one of our surveyors, and they said it looks like they've done this before, which is kind of baffling, because as far as we know, Jefferson City's never been hit by a tornado like this. And so initially that was really curious, but after some further conversations with our partners in emergency management, we found out that they actually got a lot of lessons learned and best practices from the Joplin tornado that actually happened, was it 8 years to the day prior to this event. All of the information that came out of Joplin really made its way through the emergency management community. Actually, right after my talk at AMS, Russ Schneider spoke, and he and I were chatting after the talks, and he had mentioned that the emergency manager for Joplin was extremely proactive, making sure that other emergency managers knew what he went through and knew how to prepare for catastrophic events like this. And so, like I said, it looked like they had been through this before, even though they hadn't. They had the path on lockdown. They had the most damaged parts of the area. They were already rescue operations underway. I think they had rescued at least 20 people or so by the time we had arrived. It was extremely impressive how prepared and poised they were for an event like this. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell the story of this gentleman. This is a man by the name of Paul Smyer. I mentioned earlier that a mobile home community got destroyed in this event, and he has actually got a house with a foundation right next to the mobile home community. Well, what he did, the evening before this came through, he knew that there was going to be bad weather in the area, and he also knew that mobile homes are no place to be when a tornado comes through. So he went around door to door to the mobile home community next door to him, knocked on all their doors and told them, hey, if the weather gets bad tonight, I'm going to leave my basement unlocked, and you're more than welcome to come take shelter here. Well, here are some images of what that mobile home community looked like after that tornado came through. Several of these units were completely flattened. Again, no doubt if people were in there, at the very least, some significant injuries. Be very surprised if there weren't some fatalities out of an event like this. But fortunately, through the kindness and thoughtfulness of this individual, Paul Smyer, all these people did take shelter in his basement. And I have no doubt in my mind that saved lives on this night and had a big role in what the outcome of this event was. And to me, that's incredibly encouraging, because we talk about Weather Ready Nation a lot, and this is exactly what the Weather Ready Nation is supposed to look like. Members of the public know that there's severe weather coming their way. members of the public know what to do when the severe weather comes, and they take action on it. And that's exactly what happened here. And so for me, that's incredibly encouraging. And this further endears this event for me. Obviously I'm proud of how our office performed in this event. Especially for me, I actually lived in central Missouri for 5 years while I was attending University of Missouri, about 20 miles up the road from Jefferson City. And so to see them be this prepared and handle this event as well as they did, that just makes me really happy and really proud. So how were there no fatalities? Again, I can't say that luck didn't play a factor, because it absolutely did. And there's no way getting around that. But again, there are still several things that I think the weather enterprise did well leading up to this event and during this event that really helped. Obviously building those strong relationships before the tornado. Our media partners at this point know what they can expect out of us, primarily from the point of view of what we're doing in NWS chat. They know they can rely on us to get great information while they're wall to wall. They can really lean on us for the radar analyst expertise that we have. And it's just that constant flow of information. It's just been told to us time and time again is incredibly helpful. Big one is the issuance of the tornado emergency as a new tornado warning rather than just upgrading the considerable tag. Post-storm reporting from our media partners was very helpful. Well-prepared emergency management, again, which is very impressive in this event. And then well-prepared and generous public. Again, the example of what Mr. Smyer did was just one story of people, getting through this event that really stuck out to us. And so, that just ties into that weather ready nation concept. And I think that's obviously a very worthwhile endeavor for our agency to continue to pursue. So that pretty well wraps up everything that I've got here. I'd be happy to take any questions